This is part 3, episode 97. Idiot. Zhong Biao, what are you doing? The White Tiger Duke was very observant, and naturally realized that Zhong Biao had leapt off the cliff. He started to turn anxious. At this point, the bodyguards all shouted at the same time, "Sir, please take care." Following this, all of them bit their lips and leapt off the cliff with determined looks on their faces. The White Tiger Duke was unmoved even when he was under the attack of that landslide shell. However, his expression changed now. His eyes turned red, and he roared to the 4 special guards that were beside him, "Idiots! Quickly, go and stop them." However, they didn't move at all. They even tried to block his view. The Soul Sage sorrowfully pleaded, "Sir, please leave. They are doing this for your safety. If you have any pity for them, quickly go now." In just a moment, the bodyguards apart from Dai Huabin and Zhulu had already leapt off the cliff. Dai Huabin and Zhulu were both stunned. Such a tragic scene appeared in front of them during this short span of time. They weren't even 20 years old. Even though Dai Huabin was the White Tiger Duke's son, he had never seen such a tragic scene before. Dai Huabin's head seemed to ring with what his father had once told him and his brother. Every White Tiger bodyguard is a loyal and brave warrior. The 2 of you must treat them with respect. The White Tiger Duke's eyes were blood red now, and the look in his eyes turned extremely fierce. He pulled out the box Hu Yuhao had given him earlier, tore it open, and poured his soul power into it. A ball of huge silver light quickly rose into the sky and illuminated the darkness. Very soon, it was high up in the sky. When this silver light stabilized in the sky, a silver ray descended and landed in front of the White Tiger Duke. He mimicked a lifting action, and another dim golden light ball appeared within this silver ray. This ball had a diameter of 1 meter. As it gradually rose, it seemed like a sun. It complemented the silver light ball in the sky and flew all the way up until it was next to the silver ball. The 2 lights complemented each other in the air and started to revolve around an invisible center. They formed an even larger gold and silver ball in the air. Yes, Hu Yuhao had given the White Tiger Duke the latest Class 9 soul tool that the Star Sky Doluo had created, the Sun Moon Divine Needle. With Hu Yuhao's current cultivation, he couldn't use this soul tool. However, the White Tiger Duke could. It wasn't difficult to use the Sun Moon Divine Needle. It just had to be unleashed before it would lock onto the opponent and then attack. The most difficult part about using it was the demand it had on one's soul power, as well as locking onto the opponents. Although the White Tiger Duke had just become a title Doluo, Hu Yuhao was very familiar with the White Tiger. As one of the top-ranked beast souls, the White Tiger Duke's abilities would have increased significantly after he became a title Doluo. Ordinary title Doluo couldn't compare to him. Furthermore, he was in his prime. It was during this period of his life that his blood and energy were most vigorous. It was highly likely that he would become a transcendent Doluo in the future. Since that was the case, he shouldn't have a problem using the Sun Moon Divine Needle. Although the White Tiger Duke was filled with rage and sorrow right now, he was shocked when the Sun Moon Divine Needle rose into the sky. He felt his spiritual power rising into the sky along with the needle. His range of vision expanded greatly, and his spiritual power was being strengthened continuously. Originally, he couldn't track where his enemies were. However, they soon appeared within his perception. As the Sun Moon Divine Needle spun, his soul power was also quickly being drained. However, the attacks from his enemies had weakened when the Sun Moon Divine Needle appeared. This was how terrifying a Class 9 soul tool was. The gold and silver ball in the sky was like a huge double-colored eye, coldly watching the earth and seeking its targets. As one of the top-ranked Class 9 soul tools, there were very strict requirements for using the Sun Moon Divine Needle. It had to absorb Sun Moon essence for 3 days before it could be unleashed. In addition, it drained a lot of soul power. After 3 strikes, Sun Moon essence had to be absorbed again to charge it. However, its terrifying strength was a result of the strict requirements needed to use it. The greater the requirements, the greater the destructiveness of a soul tool. Even a transcendent Doluo would be hesitant to face an attack from the Sun Moon Divine Needle. The greatest point about the Sun Moon Divine Needle was that it was effective against all elements. Because of the Sun Moon essence, any form of defense would be ineffective against it, no matter what element it was made of. In addition, it possessed the penetrating strength of a Class 9 soul tool, covering a region that spanned more than 30 kilometers. It was truly frightening. The enemy had evidently recognized the background of this Sun Moon Divine Needle, and thus they restrained their attacks. They knew that they were exposed under the surveillance of the Sun Moon Divine Needle. The White Tiger Duke, or rather the White Tiger Doluor, had an awe-inspiring look in his eyes. Through the Sun Moon Divine Needle, he observed his enemies from afar. There were more than 10 of them. He zoomed in using the needle, and could clearly see the number and color of soul rings that his enemies possessed. There were a total of 12 of them. Among them, 4 were 9-ringed title Doluor. There were even Class 9 soul engineers among them. The landslide shell couldn't have been unleashed so easily without them. Apart from the 4 title Doluor, the lowest ranked among the remaining 8 were only soul sages. There were 4 8-ringed soul Doluor. At this point, the 4 title Doluor were already shining with golden light. They had unleashed their invincible barriers. Another 4 of the remaining 8 had also unleashed invincible barriers. The 12 of them had completely split up, and they didn't dare to step forward even a centimeter anymore. This was the power of the Sun Moon Divine Needle. Even Hui Yuhao didn't know that the Sun Moon Divine Needle could make their enemies feel so fearful when it rose into the sky. Hui Yuhao's guess was completely right. These enemies came from the Sun Moon Empire. They were here to assassinate the White Tiger Duke. The White Tiger Duke held a very important status in the Star Luo Empire. He had great control over the military. If he were assassinated, it would greatly boost the Sun Moon Empire's future plans in starting the war. These 12 assassins were well prepared. Not only did they plant spies, but they even used high-altitude surveillance-type soul tools, a newly invented category of soul tools. Of the 12 assassins, 2 were even Class 9 soul engineers. They had set a trap 30 kilometers ahead using different kinds of soul tools. Once the White Tiger Duke fell into their trap, they were confident in killing him, even if he was a transcendent Doluor. However, they hadn't expected the White Tiger Duke to turn back after leaving his base. It was completely outside their expectations. One of the leading soul engineers realized that they had been exposed. However, the White Tiger Duke had already left his base. There were only 100 bodyguards with him, and thus it was still a good opportunity for them to assassinate him. As a result, they turned to their plan B, using the landslide shell to stop the White Tiger Duke, and rushed over as soon as possible. They were willing to pay any price to kill the White Tiger Duke. Just as they were about to achieve their goal, the White Tiger Duke didn't even try to break his way out, but remained to protect his subordinates. All of this left them extremely delighted. However, they were all stunned when they saw the gold and silver lights in the sky. More than half of these assassins were soul engineers. The 2 Class 9 soul engineers even had a wealth of experience. If these were any ordinary assassins, they might not have been bothered by the Sun Moon Divine Needle. However, this group of assassins was well aware of what it was. The ignorant were fearless, but those who truly knew were extremely terrified. Who didn't know about the Sun Moon Needle, the soul tool that made the Star Sky Doluor Yi Yulin famous? Among these 2 Class 9 soul engineers, one of them was even a good friend of Yi Yulin. He happened to know about the Sun Moon Divine Needle that had just been researched and created. This was why he immediately activated his invincible barrier the moment he saw the Sun Moon Divine Needle. Even though he knew his invincible barrier might not be able to stop the needle, it was still better than not having any protection at all. When he mentioned that it was the Sun Moon Divine Needle, the soul engineers present also broke out in a cold sweat. The Sun Divine Needle was known as the light of the death god. Whoever it shone on would be struck dead. The power of the Sun Moon Divine Needle was even greater than the Sun Divine Needle. Let alone a transcendent Doluor, even someone of Elder Xian's cultivation would be hurt if he tried to deal with an attack from the needle. These assassins were here to kill the White Tiger Duke, not to die. The 4 title Doluor treasured their lives a lot. What do we do? Why does he have the Sun-Moon Divine Needle? Don't tell me that the Starsky Doluor. Impossible. The Starsky Doluor wouldn't betray us. Let's decide quickly. Our invincible barriers won't last long. Let's retreat first before coming up with a new plan. The leading Class 9 Soul Engineer was decisive, and gave the order to retreat. One's life was very precious. Everyone only had one life. None of them were willing to risk getting killed by the Sun-Moon Divine Needle in their bid to assassinate the White Tiger. None of them dared to. As a result, these 12 assassins immediately turned and fled. To them, their main worry now was finding the fastest way to get at least 15 kilometers away. The White Tiger Duke still had a glimmer of hope right now. He had seen Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga leaping off the cliff, too. That was why he didn't activate the Sun-Moon Divine Needle immediately. The strongest weapons were the most terrifying before they were used. Although he didn't know why his opponents had run, he was relieved to be safe temporarily. Right now, he could only watch and see whether the mysterious man could save his subordinates. The White Tiger Duke was holding on over on his side, while Hu Yuhao was very busy in the air right now. After he jumped off the cliff with Wang Donga immediately opened up her butterfly goddess wings. The first to jump off the cliff was Zhong Biao. The cliff seemed to be at least 300 meters high. If a Soul Master couldn't fly and didn't have any way of reducing the speed of his descent, he was bound to die from the fall. As Hu Yuhao dove down rapidly, he unleashed his spiritual power to the best of his abilities. A huge spiritual net quickly engulfed the air around him, and all the White Tiger bodyguards that had leapt off the cliff. In this way, he could tell exactly where each of them was. A streak of deep blue light shot out from Hu Yuhao's forehead and instantly descended. It was the Little Snow Lady. When the Little Snow Lady appeared, she waved her hands in the air rapidly. A gust of strong wind rose from the mountain valley. The wind slowed the descent of all the bodyguards, even though they were all decked out in armor. The Snow Empress didn't just control snow. She was the Ice Sky Snow Lady. In the extreme north, the extreme chill wasn't the only scary thing, there was also the wind. This was also one aspect in which the Snow Empress was stronger than the Ice Empress. Apart from the extreme chill, she also had a deep grasp of the profundity of the wind. For example, the snowy dance of ultimate ice included gales. Hu Yuhao was only afraid his ultimate ice would affect the bodyguards, and thus he didn't use his domain's strength to gather them. He could only let the Little Snow Lady slow their descent. As she controlled the wind, the Little Snow Lady had already charged all the way down. In a flash, she was beside Zhong Biao. She used her little hands to gently push Zhong Biao's back. He was about 30 meters from the ground, but he was now flying towards the side instead of falling as he was pushed. Zhong Biao was also a Soul Master. The sudden force that came from his side shocked him. He subconsciously lifted his body in a hurry and tried to control it. For a Soul Master of his rank, 30 meters was a manageable height. As he rolled in the air, he exploited the sudden force that came from his side to reduce the speed of his descent. He also used his palms and soul power to slow his fall. After the Little Snow Lady pushed Zhong Biao, she lifted her hands once again. Another gust of wind blew upward and slowed the momentum of the bodyguards, who were still falling. Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga finally charged down, after the Little Snow Lady helped to stall the descent of the bodyguards. At this point, the two of them reached their fastest speed. Along with the Little Snow Lady, they started flipping and moving about. They caught hold of the bodyguards that were falling from the sky. Hu Yuhao felt very regretful that he didn't have a soul tool he could use now. His soul tools were mainly very lethal. At this point, there were too many bodyguards falling, even though the area that they covered wasn't too extensive. Hu Yuhao unleashed the life-reflecting shield with his right hand and a protective barrier with his body. As he flipped about, he continued to use the Tang sect's controlling crane capturing dragon. However, he still couldn't catch everyone. As one person fell, he caught hold of him before instantly pushing him away. He used his right leg to hook onto another person, and also used his life-reflecting shield to knock someone else away. He charged forward quickly, and managed to grab hold of more than 10 people. However, he couldn't possibly catch everyone. He simply had no time. He could only knock them to the sides, just as they were about to crash, reducing their speed of descent. They were bound to get hurt, but at least they could still preserve their lives. However, there were still some bodyguards who couldn't be saved even though Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong tried their best. 300 meters. They had jumped 300 meters off a cliff, and they were all wearing armor. Their momentum was deadly. Hu Yuhao was only a sole king, and Wang Dong was only a sole emperor. Even if they were slightly stronger, they couldn't possibly save that many people spread out over such a large area. Blood splattered around them, and life after life was lost. Hu Yuhao bit his lips tightly. All these soldiers were dead, because they were trying to protect the White Tiger Duke. They had jumped off the cliff willingly. Before they jumped off, they had even asked the White Tiger Duke to take care of himself. It was Hu Yuhao's first time seeing this kind of soldier. It was also his first time experiencing the smell of blood and iron that one could only experience in the military. A bloody smell spread out, and Hu Yuhao was already tearing up. He had done his best. When he grabbed hold of the last bodyguard, he discovered that his arms were already aching. He forcefully rolled on the ground, and his human-shaped soul tool let out a piercing, screeching sound. It took some time before he managed to reduce his falling momentum. However, the inertia still caused him to crash, and he couldn't help but spit out blood on the inside of his mask. There was a blurry red in front of his eyes. He felt extremely weak right now. He only heard tragic screams around him. Along with the bloody smell that drifted throughout the entire area, he was feeling very distressed. What kind of soldiers were they? They were willing to sacrifice their precious lives for their own general. They jumped off the cliff without any hesitation. Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong didn't know how many people they had saved. The entire process only took 1 minute. However, they had drained their soul power and energy. The feeling that they were experiencing now couldn't be described with words. They had tried their best in this 1 minute. However, Wang Dong couldn't help but cry when she saw fresh blood splattering from the human figures below her. They are. Hu Yuhao peered into the sky and shouted furiously. His spiritual power soared tremendously, but he couldn't do anything now. What was supposed to happen had already happened. He couldn't have possibly saved these few precious lives. At this point, a calm voice sounded in his mind: the enemies have retreated. The White Tiger Duke is no longer in a crisis. You have passed the deep adventure round. Right now, you have 2 choices. You can choose to pass this round, or use this opportunity to restore everything back to normal. By restoring everything back to normal, those who have not yet been dead for 15 minutes will recover completely. However, those who have been dead for more than 15 minutes can't recover, as their spirits have dissipated. If you choose this option, you must go through the deep adventure round once again. You can make your choice now, but you'll only have 10 seconds to decide. After 10 seconds, the 2 of you will automatically be returned to the valley. Wang Dong naturally heard what Hu Yuhao heard. The 2 of them looked at each other, and they each saw the surprise and persistence in the other's eyes. Wang Dong grabbed Hu Yuhao's hand and the 2 of them shouted at the same time, "We'll choose to restore everything back to normal." Yes, they were willing to go through the deep adventure round once again to save all the soldiers and their loyalty. Suddenly, a strange ball of light appeared. A bright golden light that seemed like the sun appeared above Hu Yuhao's head, while a silver crescent surfaced above Wang Dong's head. The radiance of the sun and moon, yin-yang love querying. The calm voice echoed throughout the entire mountain valley. Following this, a gold and silver light spread from Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong's bodies. The bodyguards were all covered by the same gold and silver light. The bodyguards, who were still alive, were shocked as they looked at Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong. At this moment, they could roughly make out their appearance. They could clearly sense a strange, warm flow circling their bodies before the excruciating pain from their wounds disappeared. All of their injuries were healing at an alarming speed. What was even stranger was that the pools of blood on the ground started to flow back into the corpses lying on the ground. The bodies started to contort slightly. Gradually, their actions became more and more obvious. There were even some who started crawling up. The bodyguards, who had just lost their lives, seemed very confused now. They turned around and stared at Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga in shock. They couldn't believe it. Miracle. This is a miracle. Are the two of you immortals that have descended to the mortal world? Zhong Biao crawled up from the ground at this moment. He was also hurt. There were many jagged rocks on the ground, which was also the reason why many of the bodyguards were hurt and killed. However, his injuries had already fully recovered after he was immersed in the gold and silver light. He saw a ravishing beauty with flowing blue hair, and another person who was covered entirely in metal, emitting an intense golden glow. They were holding hands as a miraculous glow shone from their bodies. It wasn't just light that came from their bodies, there was also warmth. More and more of the bodyguards were standing up by now. All of them turned around and faced Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga, who were both emitting the sun-moon radiance. The White Tiger bodyguards started to kneel down on one knee and expressed their gratitude towards the both of them for giving them a chance to live again. Their eyes were filled with respect and passion. In their hearts, the two of them possessed the strength of gods. The gold and silver light suddenly became much more glaring. In the next instant, the light withdrew towards the center. When it disappeared, Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga disappeared with it. At the same time, Dai Huabin and Zhulu also heard the same calm voice. The White Tiger Duke's crisis has been averted. The deep adventure round has ended and the two of you have passed. Everything started to distort and become blurry at this moment as their world seemed to be spinning. Whether it was Hu Yuhao, Wang Donga, Dai Huabin or Zhulu, they all entered a weird space. The calm voice sounded in their ears once again. The voice said to Dai Huabin and Zhulu, "The two of you only put in an average performance in the deep adventure round, and thus you barely passed the round. There won't be any rewards, but the two of you can enter the last round, the sincerity love querying great adventure. I hope that you can pass the next round." The light flashed, and Dai Huabin and Zhulu disappeared. The same voice sounded in Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga's ears. However, they heard different things than Dai Huabin and Zhulu had. The White Tiger Duke met with danger, and Hu Yuhao was able to use his spiritual power to warn him, as well as to gain his trust using his own abilities. This is an important reason why the two of you passed this deep adventure round. However, you didn't use your own abilities to chase the enemies away. Instead, you used external items to do so. As a result, you didn't pass the deep adventure round with full marks. However, on account of the fact that you saved everyone in time and reduced the number of casualties, I'll consider it a pass. Originally, the reward that the two of you were supposed to get was one chance to recover from a critical injury. However, you instead chose to restore everything to normal. As a result, your rewards will be cancelled, and your points have become negative. The two of you will need to go through another deep adventure round. If you pass, you can advance to the third round, the true love querying great adventure. Be prepared, your second deep adventure round is about to start. Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga still felt as if their world was spinning. They couldn't see their surroundings clearly. However, they were smiling delightedly at this moment, and they gripped each other's hands tightly. They didn't regret having to go through the deep adventure round again. To be able to revive so many loyal soldiers, they felt that it was worth it even if they had to go through several more rounds. Right now, the satisfaction that they felt in their hearts was unrivaled. As a light flashed, Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga also disappeared. White light descended from the sky. The White Tiger Duke landed in the valley. He was stunned when he saw his bodyguards standing on the jagged rocks. At this point, the reinforcements from the base had already arrived. Many strong individuals were here to protect the White Tiger Duke. The sun-moon divine needle was still shining in the sky. It was a pity that their enemies had already fled far away. Seeing that most of his subordinates were still alive, the White Tiger Duke was feeling very emotional as he looked at the gold and silver ball in the sky. Who was that? Who was it that helped me and saved me from this crisis? Who exactly was it? The White Tiger Duke stood there in a daze, and didn't speak for a long time. Bei Bei and Shusansha were in a rather disastrous situation right now. After they encountered the Radiant City Patrol, they had no choice but to use force to charge their way out. They couldn't possibly explain their identities. In addition, they didn't even look like they came from the Sun Moon Empire. However, they attracted even more enemies after they charged past the first group of guards. It was only now that Bei Bei and Shusansha realized how terrifying Radiant City was. Even though the surrounding walls were broken and dilapidated, defense-type soul tools were still everywhere. However, the aerial surveillance soul tools were even more terrifying. The surveillance soul tools weren't very strong, but they remained hundreds of meters in the air. They were very practical, and were used to follow Shusansha and Bei Bei. With these surveillance soul tools to guide them, the Sun Moon Empire's soldiers were always hot on their trail. Even though the two of them were strong, they were still in peril. In addition, soul engineers had been deployed to deal with them because they were resisting strongly. Right now, they were still some way off from the western edge of Radiant City. What left Bei Bei and Shusansha even more depressed was that their injuries were starting to influence their abilities. Golden light flashed, and Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga finally felt stable. It took the two of them some time to adapt before they stopped feeling dizzy. Hu Yuhao pulled Wang Donga close to him, and subconsciously activated his spiritual detection. Hu Yuhao was surprised by current state of his body. Earlier, he and Wang Donga had drained themselves to save the White Tiger bodyguards, but right now, he discovered that he was feeling much better. Even his soul power seemed to have experienced an improvement, and his spiritual power had become more refined. However, Hu Yuhao's expression suddenly changed greatly. He exclaimed, "Ah! What's going on?" As he shouted, Wang Donga also became anxious. Hu Yuhao looked heartbroken as he said, "My Sun Moon Divine Needle is still with the White Tiger Duke. It's a Class 9 soul tool. If the Duskwater Alliance wasn't trying to poach me, they wouldn't have asked Xu Qianran to make Yi Yulin give up the Sun Moon Divine Needle." Hu Yuhao was very clever. During the tournament, he had already guessed the reason why the Star Sky Doluor had offered the Sun Moon Divine Needle as a reward for the champion. The tournament was decided with a fight, and the Duskwater Alliance knew how strong Hu Yuhao's martial soul was. They were trying to use a Class 9 soul tool and a Class 9 stationary soul cannon shell to bribe him. In fact, it was just another way of boosting the strength of the Holy Ghost Church. The truth was that their judgment of Hu Yuhao's abilities was accurate. Even with Yi Gai's appearance, Hu Yuhao still managed to attain victory. As for Yi Gai, she was in a slightly more pitiful state right now. Hu Yuhao had placed her in his spectral demiplane, and was prepared to release her after he managed to escape danger following the conclusion of the tournament. However, who would have expected the Yin-Yang Love Querying Valley to appear so suddenly, isolating his connection with his spectral demiplane? Yi Gai had no choice but to wait for a while longer inside. Of course, Hu Yuhao could guarantee Yi Gai's safety. The spectral demiplane was passed down from Electrolux to Hu Yuhao. As his teacher, Electrolux had also passed him the key to controlling the demiplane. Even though Hu Yuhao couldn't completely control the demiplane given his lack of abilities, he was still able to draw out a safe region to contain Yi Gai. Hu Yuhao's heart was aching after he lost the Sun Moon Divine Needle. Given his twin martial souls, he should have been able to use the needle when he obtained 8 rings. It was a powerful soul tool that even a transcendent Doluor was terrified of. "Are you really heartbroken?" Wang Donga was amused as she looked at him. Hu Yuhao was stunned. "Am I not supposed to feel this way?" Wang Donga chortled and hugged his metal arm. She said, "You didn't give it to an outsider, though." Hu Yuhao's expression turned slightly weird. As he recalled what had happened earlier, he suddenly realized that he had started to hate the White Tiger Duke less and less. He had been filled with admiration and respect when he saw how the White Tiger Duke sacrificed his safety for his subordinates. "No, I won't forgive him," Hu Yuhao forcefully told himself. However, he didn't feel so heartbroken when he realized he had given the Sun Moon Divine Needle to the White Tiger Duke. Whatever. At least he's safer with the needle. That way, he won't be killed so easily, and he can wait for me to return to exact revenge on him. As he thought about it from this perspective, Hu Yuhao felt that he had straightened things out. His expression also returned to normal. At this moment, the calm voice that made Hu Yuhao and Wang Dong jumpy sounded once again. The deep adventure round begins. The topic is rescue. Another rescue. However, Hu Yuhao's expression changed in the next instant. The two of you are to the west of Radiant City. Bei Bei and Shu Sansha are trying to break out from this direction. The two of you will be considered to have passed this round, if you can rescue them from the danger they are currently facing and return to the Western Mountain. If the two of you fail this mission, the punishment is death. At the same time, the two of them will also die. The Deep Adventure round begins. Eldest and third senior's Deep Adventure round was actually in Radiant City. Radiant City is a very dangerous place to be in right now. Just as Hu Yuhao was horrified, he was also depressed. That was because he hadn't been given enough information. He was supposed to rescue them, but he didn't know their exact location. This meant that they still had to locate them before rescuing them. It was going to be very difficult. This video will end here.